What is going on, everyone? Today we are starting a new series on how to escape bronze and climb into higher ranks in Marvel Rivals as a solo. Now let's just get right into it. I'm going to start off by saying in bronze rank you're going to have to deal with some really weird issues that in the higher ranks you're not going to see as much. They will still happen, but they're a lot more common in this rank. Now those are going to be things like people that are just going to instant lock DPS, so you're probably going to have a team eventually where 4 or 5 of your players are just going to insta lock DPS, which can be really frustrating. Now another issue you're going to have to deal with is people getting mad at the game and quitting mid-match. Now this is going to happen in any elo, it's just a lot more common in the bronze, silver, and gold lobbies, unfortunately. And lastly is going to be dealing with Smurf accounts. Now this can be kind of frustrating because Grandmaster Eternity players have a pretty good understanding of how to play the game, and they can pretty much steamroll an entire team at this rank because your team doesn't really know how to combat that kind of level of playstyle. So if you do get into one of these lobbies, don't let it, keep you down too much. Just try to move on and get into a different game. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's move on to our tips about how to get out of bronze. Alright, so moving on to tip number 1. I think the biggest question people are going to have on us is going to be, what is the best role to get out of bronze? And then really, I think that depends on how you play as a person. From my own accounts, I was able to get out of bronze easily with Vanguards, Duelists, and Strategists. So none of the 3 are impossible. All of them, if you know how to play them well, you can get out of bronze very easily. But in my own opinion, I think Duelist is the hardest of the 3 to get out of bronze, just because you have to be fairly good to carry an entire team, or you really have to hope that you have a tank that can hold the front line, or supports that are going to be able to heal you and the tank at the same time. Now, one tip I do have for you on playing a Duelist, if that's the route you want to go, is learn how to play natural cover, because your healers are not going to be able to differentiate you from the tanks, and they're going to really probably focus more on the tanks most of the time. So understanding where health packs are or using a wall for some cover is a really good idea. As for the second hardest thing to rank up, I think that's going to be Strategist or Healer, whichever way you want to say that. Now with Healer, you have to really hope that your tank and DPS can notice if enemies are diving you in the backline, so it's a good thing to focus on learning how to use your escapes, so things like Luna Freeze or Mantis Sleep, to avoid taking too much damage and hopefully getting your team to turn around to help you out. But like I said before, similar to what the DPS is dealing with, you're going to have to worry about hoping your tank is not just running straight into the enemy and just dying. And that brings us to what I think is personally the easiest way to climb out of bronze, and that is playing Vanguards. Now, there are specific characters that I think are easier to do this with at a lower skill level, and that is characters like Groot, because his overall abilities are really easy to learn, but they're hard to master. But one thing you can do with Groot is use your walls to negate a lot of enemy damage. So if you just are able to place those walls and negate some damage that the enemy is trying to do to you or your team, so that your healers can keep up, your DPS can stay alive and keep doing the damage, that really will honestly just carry you right into silver pretty easily. I just feel like Groot gets his walls so easily and so quickly, and you don't really have to worry about managing the health of those as much as you do a shield or the timing of shields on Magneto. So that is my tip, but let's go right into tip number 2. Now, while we're on the topic of characters, I do see a lot of people typing in chat that they only know how to play one character at this rank. And honestly, this is a huge mistake in my opinion. While yes, you could get away with, one-tricking one character, there are going to be times where being able to swap off is extremely vital. I would always recommend at least learning, I would say, 2 characters in each role. This gives you the ability to say, if you tank normally and your team just autofills tank before you can select a character, you're not going to be throwing the game because you have no idea how to either play heals or DPS. And I'm not saying you need to be an expert at these characters, but honestly, just make sure that you're at least comfortable with their abilities. And like I said, only 2 characters, that's really all you need to learn, and just understanding how they play at a minimum. Alright, so moving on to tip number 3, and that is work on understanding the maps. For this tip, I am not saying that you should have every health pack memorized or every flank point, known on the map, but what you really do want to understand is the overall layout of the maps, and also know where the spawn points are. That is at a minimum. Just know that there is going to be more map knowledge that you're going to be required to at the higher ranks, but I think at bronze, understanding the basic layouts and spawn points is good enough. Now, tip number 4 is review your previous games and look at your desk. Now, I think this one gets overlooked a lot of the time, but if you struggle to climb, take a little bit of time and go back and rewatch some of your games. Instead of focusing on all the footage and really what's going on, really focus on when, where, and how you died at each time. Now, reducing how much you die means you are in the fight for longer and making a bigger impact with your team. Also note that this isn't a time to blame your teammates on what they did wrong, but really just focus on your own self. Look for things like, was I taking fights into the enemy team when my team wasn't around? Could I have hid behind a wall to be a little bit safer while I was engaging the enemy? Could I have disengaged away and grabbed a health pack? Could I have even stood differently so a healer could have seen me better? Questions like this are what I tend to think about when I review my own games. Now for tip number 5, that is going to be focus on aiming better. Now this goes for most games and it seems like a given, but having better aim does allow you to land more shots or abilities easier. Now, one thing I would say to help get better aim is go into the practice range and try turning down your sensitivity lower than what you're used to. Find something that almost makes it feel easy to track bots in the training range and keep hitting them with your abilities almost consistently. As you learn with this, you can usually up your sensitivity after a little while and gradually find a good balance of where your accuracy just kind of falls off, but you're able to track a little bit quicker than maybe the slower sensitivities. Now, in game, I think you should be focusing on at least having 30% accuracy for most characters. I know some characters are much easier to hit up to 80 or 90%, but at 30% for most characters, I think the climb out of bronze should be easy enough. Up next for tip number 6, that is going to be changing your crosshair. Now, I feel like this goes along with aiming because having a good crosshair that you feel comfortable with looking at and kind of knowing where it's, what you're shooting at a little bit easier can make all the difference. Now, I found this site a little while ago, which is pretty awesome, and I'll put this in the description, but it gives you a handful of really good preset crosshairs to choose from, and it also allows you to design your crosshair on that site too if you don't want to boot up the game and try to play around with those settings. Now, those of you that don't know how to input a custom crosshair, it is very simple. All we have to do is go into settings, keyboards, scroll down to crosshairs, and you should see this little import icon. Simply just copy and paste the code right in there and you are good to go. It should auto save it as a new save, so you can always select it. You can also modify it in game as well if you really need to. Now, tip number 7 is lost streaks happen, and I think one thing people should be aware of is media doesn't really show us about lost streaks. Unfortunately, influencers and pros won't talk about them because it doesn't really make exciting content. But the unfortunate reality is lost streaks still happen to all of us. One thing I think should be known is if you are on a lost streak and angry at the game, try simply just walking away for a little bit. When you're frustrated or angry, you're going to be making a lot more simple mistakes that you really can't get back because now you're losing even more elo. Try going to play like a game or two of quick play, then go back into comp, but myself, I like to take a 20-30 minute break, watch maybe like a funny show, grab a snack, get in the right headspace, and then head back into comp. Now, tip number 8 is going to be learning how to group up or just giving up and dying to respawn with your team. Now, this is kind of a two-part tip because the first is that your team should be regrouping after losing a fight to re-engage into another fight. You want to make sure that your fights are either at an advantage or even for every fight. And the second part is that too many people are afraid of dying when their whole team is dead and the enemy team is, still full, or they have 4 players versus 1. And so they'll do everything they can to burn abilities to stay alive for as long as possible. And while there are times where this is great, if you still have 2 minutes or something left to get to a point, it might be better just to let the enemy just kill you so you can regroup with your team, because half the time your team at this rank is not going to wait for you to respawn. They're going to rush in and again, be at a disadvantage. So giving up and just respawning with your team sometimes is the better option. Alright, so moving on to tip number 9, and this is one, I know this is a solo guide, guys, but sometimes trying to find a duo is the best way and easiest way to climb out of bronze, unfortunately. Whether that is someone that maybe you've played with in a previous match and you get along with, in the voice chat or something like that, and you find somebody that you can complement their playstyle. So things like if you have a duo, having like a tanker support or a DPS and support in good combinations, things like Groot with a Rocket or a Jeff, or a Luna and Namor are great examples of how to get out. And if you guys are decent players, getting out of bronze as a duo like that is very, very simple and can take as little as I think 6 games. Now moving on to tip number 10, and that is I really want to state that there's no real secret way to get out of each rank. Now, while these tips will definitely help you, it really does come down to understanding your characters, the maps, and some of the strategies used against the enemy team on how to play your characters and those maps into those teams. Now, each rank, I think this knowledge becomes more compounded and you need to have a deeper knowledge, but honestly, the whole point of this game is to have fun. So if you're not having fun, you might want to look towards a different game or a different game mode. But if you are having fun and you do want to rank up, a little bit more time in the game, a little bit more effort of understanding your characters or taking a deeper dive into your deaths will make all the difference. So that's all the tips I have for you of getting out of bronze as of right now. I do think we will have some more deeper dive into additional tips when we get into this silver video. But if you did like this video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next videos up into the series, and I'll see you in the next one.